The Center for the Improvement of Human Functioning International presents this luncheon lecture. Today's topic, how to build emotional intelligence at home and in the classroom. Your presenter, Mary Braud, MD.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for showing up today on this beautiful day. We'll hopefully get you back outside and you can enjoy some sunshine before the end of the day here. Just to let you know a little background about how my brain is working and why I'm presenting this lecture at this particular time, since the workings of my brain aren't always obvious. Earlier in the fall, we presented the Pediatric Brain Health and Behavior Protocol, which is a new protocol that we're doing here at the center for parents who have children with emotional or behavioral disturbances, that they want them to be patients of the center, as opposed to the adult evaluation where the laboratory thing is sort of open-ended. For the Pediatric Brain Health and Behavior Protocol, we've established a certain laboratory protocol so that you kind of know what your laboratory bill is going to be ahead of time. I actually did a lunch lecture on that in the fall and explained that protocol, went over some of the laboratory that we're doing. I then did a kind of follow-up to that, sort of talking about emotional development and some of the things that children need in the course of emotional development. And then now we're getting around to looking a little bit, still looking at that concept of emotional development, but looking at how some of that pertains to school and why emotional development and taking care of our children's emotional development is so important in their school life. So our learning objectives for today were that we would define and describe exactly what emotional intelligence is, discuss social and emotional learning in schools and how schools can deliver that kind of learning, those kind of learning programs, and then also discuss ways that parents can foster emotional intelligence in their homes. So what exactly is emotional intelligence? I'm forgetting the exact year. I want to, what year the book Emotional Intelligence, written by Daniel Goleman, came out. It's been a number of years ago now. And since he introduced that concept, there have obviously been a number of writers and authors investigating and writing about this area. Two authors, Mayer and Salovey, define emotional intelligence as an individual's capacity to reason about emotions and to process emotional information to enhance cognitive processes and regulate behavior. And according to these two authors, emotional intelligence is actually a skill-based area of development. And we'll look at those specific skills in the coming up slides. So as you acquire skills in the first three areas, that leads to proficiency in the fourth area. And their model of emotional intelligence is a little bit in contrast to other models where it's just sort of based on perceived abilities, like you perceived optimism, or you perceive what your stress tolerance is. They've actually developed tools that can help assess these particular skills, and therefore that's why they defined it as a skills-based area. And they've done quite a number of studies with their assessment protocol. So the first skill of emotional intelligence, according to these authors, is perception of emotion. And that's the ability to perceive emotion in yourself or in others, as well as to sort of perceive emotion from other sources, such as an object of art, or the emotional content of a story, or the emotional content of a piece of music. And so to be able to relate that information coming in and have your own experience of it and your own understanding of it. We know that we can definitely see, like, for instance, individuals with autism definitely have a very distinct deficit in interpreting this kind of information. At least children who are lower on the autism scale, children who get lots of behavioral support, actually can often do quite well with this area. Another type of learning disability known as nonverbal learning disability. These children are actually, unlike children with autism, they're quite bright. They're often quite verbal, but they can often have profound difficulty in interpreting facial cues and emotional cues from people. Another type of child who might have difficulty with the perception of emotion is the child who's been traumatized. The child who's been traumatized will often read threat and danger into situations and facial signals that other people wouldn't consider threatening. And as I was pulling this together, I added to each one of these slides a little little experiential thing for you to sort of ask yourself, what do you think happens when adults lie to children about emotional experiences? When an adult is having a hard time but says to the child, "I'm fine," what's the child supposed to make of that? The second skill of emotional intelligence, the use of emotion to facilitate thinking. So the use of your emotional signals to sort of help you make a decision or help you analyze what's going on. I think for a lot of us, our experience with our emotions is oftentimes when we feel really emotional, what we experience then is the inability to think. And that's true for all of us. When we're overwhelmed by emotions, it's very difficult to think. In fact, I think stress makes you stupid. When you're really activated, the thinking part of your brain is not working as hard as your fear part of your brain is working. In those kinds of situations, if at least one person, and I'm saying this to this group of adults, if you, the adult, can stay calm while your child loses it, you've got a better chance of that situation going in a desired direction as opposed to both of you getting escalated and losing control of your emotions. What do you think we teach our children when we tell them, "Well, I just lost control," or "I can't help that, I got so mad"? What's the lesson, do you think, that they learn about their emotions if that's the kind of language and that's the kind of lesson that we're teaching them? The third skill of emotional intelligence, understanding of emotion. So that's the ability to make sense of the emotional information that you're perceiving in your body and to know the causes of emotion. I think this is really important for all of us to learn. Emotions are in part a body signal that then kind of gets tied up into how our individual brain matches that signal from our body with our past experience to create a perception of what's going on. And a lot of people just think, think that emotions only arise in this one circumstance and don't realize that actually emotions are always tied to your own past experience. There's no unique emotions once you get to be an adult. They're all tied up with your past. But helping kids understand how emotions can shift and change. We don't have one emotional experience that stays the same, or we don't have to. So the child who's beginning their day with something bad happening, who's then's going to say, "Oh, my day is ruined." How do we help someone learn that you're not stuck with your emotions? You have them in the moment. You can then think through them and change them. But that's a really difficult and delicate thing to try to model to children, especially when they're having difficulty with it. And finally, the fourth skill, according to these authors, the management of emotions. So the ability to be accepting of feelings and to effectively use strategies that foster personal understanding of yourself and of others. We may not all have the same emotional experience in any given situation, but it's really important to allow others to have their own experience. So the question here is, how do you accept feelings and emotions yourself? How do you accept and tolerate the emotional experience of others, especially of your children? What are the benefits of emotional intelligence? In adults, looking at both college age as well as older adults, higher scores on the emotional intelligence assessments developed by Mayer and his colleagues correlate with better quality relationships, enhanced academic performance and achievement, increased stress tolerance in the workplace, as well as higher pay. So nothing to sniff about, to just disregard. Lower EI scores in adults are associated with drug use, alcohol use, and fighting. In children, higher scores are found in children with better adaptability, leadership, and study skills. This is their teachers measuring the children's abilities, whereas lower scores are seen in children with more aggression, anxiety, hyperactivity, and conduct problems, along with substance abuse, and I put aggression twice, pardon that. So how do we think emotional intelligence produces these effects? One of the thoughts is that When teachers and their students are more proficient in these skills, there's better communication in the classroom and better stress management. So there's, in general, a more positive work or school environment. In particular, poor stress management by teachers who are overwhelmed and stressed out, they end up being burnout and dissatisfied with their jobs. Other studies have looked at teachers who have difficulty regulating their own emotions and sort of expressing that, sort of being emotionally out of control in the classroom, in turn have children in classrooms where there's more negative emotion being expressed overall. We know that your emotions drive your attention. When you're excited about something, you're more likely to pay attention to it. If you're anxious about something, you're more likely to sort of withdraw from it and not be as engaged. Unregulated negative emotions clearly interfere with attention. As we talked about, the stress makes you stupid. When you're charged up and your amygdala is telling you to pay attention to other stimuli, you can't attend to the lesson. And we know that definitely comes up in things like, anxiety and test performance. There's students who may know the material very well, but every time they get into that test situation, their anxiety overwhelms them and they end up having a poor result on a test. Researchers have looked at, the social and emotional function of younger children. So as young as age 8, sort of how children are functioning in this area is predictive of their outcomes later. And really, what all this research points to is that the ability to regulate your emotion really can't be separated from your intellectual ability. They're not two distinct things. They're intertwined with each other. So how are we doing in supporting our children's emotional development? These are some national statistics taken from a talk that O'Brien did for the organization CASEL that I'll be mentioning a little bit later. In the past year, 14% of kids had been in at least one physical fight. Almost 30% had been bullied at least at one point. 17%, nearly 20% of children seriously considering suicide in the past year. Sexual intercourse with more than 3 people, almost 15%. Those are pretty frightening statistics for our kids and what they're experiencing these days. One of the resources that I came across in pulling together this talk is in an organization known as CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. And it's an organization that's dedicated to making social and emotional learning an essential part of education. Their goals are to advance the science of social and emotional learning, to expand integrated and evidence-based SEL practice into more and more schools, and to strengthen the field of SEL by supporting research, by supporting scholars, by hosting academic meetings. And that's their website there, casel.org. There's lots and lots of information on this site, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of the specific things that CASEL has done. Over the past few decades, what many schools have done in trying to support children and their social and emotional needs are really fragmented efforts delivered, usually regarding around one topic or a few areas of concern, like AIDS or like mental health or a bully prevention program or pregnancy prevention or suicide awareness. And one of the problems with some of these efforts is that they tend to be brief, maybe a week or a 2-week-long program. As such, they tend to disrupt the school schedule. So oftentimes, the delivery of these programs might be met with resistance by some of the staff, the teachers whose academic time is going to be cut in order to have this program be presented might not really be welcoming of it going on. And in particular, the brevity, one of the things that CASEL has discovered is that these brief programs really don't have a lasting impact on children's behavior and attitudes. So as opposed to these type of programs with kind of fragmented efforts occurring just in fits and starts, CASEL believes that programs that provide a coordinated, strength-based approach to promote students' capabilities, delivered over the long term, delivered by the classroom teachers, and integrated into everyday experience is the best route for enhancing and teaching these types of skills. Castle defines social and emotional learning as the process through which children and adolescents develop these certain skills: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, all of those things leading towards the ability to have good decision-making abilities. So let's take a look at some of those factors. And those are those same things, kind of just displayed a little different, kind of helps you look at self. It's, relates to your ability to manage yourself, your ability to deal with others, and your ability to make good decisions. So self-awareness. As opposed to the concept of self-esteem, which, that's kind of was the buzzword there for a while, and it's taken a bashing, and in some ways deservedly so. Self-esteem, telling a kid good job for everything they do. What did one author say, saw a kid being praised for swinging, like, good job against gravity there. Self-awareness is about having an accurate perception of yourself, to know what your abilities are, and therefore to know how to ask for help when you need to know what your abilities don't include, to know how to ask for help. Self-awareness gets back to that ability to identify your own emotions, to understand their origins, and obviously these type of lessons need to be delivered in age-appropriate language, but even young children can begin to understand some of these things. Self-awareness gives you a sense of what you can do, a sense of efficacy. Self-management pertains to having an awareness that you can handle your feelings. Either you can handle them on your own, or you can know kind of the point where they're too strong and you know when you need to go ask for help with managing how you feel. Self-management pertains to, being able to slow down and not just respond automatically to an impulse to do something. So good impulse control. Having some self-discipline and some motivation. So knowing that you have to wait to get things done, or knowing that, once you get your homework done, you can go play, or once you get a certain task done, there'll be fun time, or something like that. Self-management pertains to having good organizational skills. Social awareness pertains to, being able to relate to others, being able to understand somebody else's perspective, being able to empathize, to sort of put yourself in their shoes. You may not feel their same emotions, but hopefully you can relate to what they're experiencing. Being able to listen, having respect for others, appreciating their viewpoints, appreciating their cultural backgrounds. Other awareness also relates to relationship skills. So that means the ability to communicate what's going on with you clearly, being able to ask and inquire about someone else's abilities, knowing how to work with others. So kids who have better relationship skills can complete a group assignment in a classroom setting. They can negotiate games, rules, assignments, or activities. Knowing when and how to say no. That's real important for children to learn. And children who are at home sort of instructed to say yes, rotely, to everything, and don't learn how to negotiate a healthy no, are actually at higher risk for saying yes to the friend who says, here, smoke this, try this. Learning how to say no is a skill that has to be taught and practiced and learned, and obviously it needs to be appropriate. We don't want our children screaming no at us, but children need to learn how to have a differing opinion and feel comfortable stating that and knowing how to do that. Part of relationship skills is knowing how and when to ask for help, how to offer it to others, as opposed to just watching somebody struggle with something. And all of those skills leading to, the ability to make good, responsible decisions. So being able to identify a problem that you're having, being able to analyze what's going on and sort of evaluate what's happening, being able to come up with potential solutions to any potential problem, evaluating the possible result from any solution you might choose, and then taking responsibility for whatever action you embark on. So social and emotional skills can be developed in school when age and culture appropriate instruction is provided. when these skills are modeled. And again, these aren't things that you can just sort of do briefly and then put back on the shelf. It needs to be continuously put in front of children. And having kids reflect on experiences in the classroom, in their personal lives, in the world at large. And we'll got an example of a specific lesson of that. So from Brackett and Kachulak, whose their information is linked to from the CASEL website. They're a company that delivers workshops and programs to teachers on how, they're one of several that CASEL endorses and refers people to. So from one of their papers was, just 6 concrete how-to steps for teachers. And the chapter that I cited includes a couple of other things, but here's just an example of how a teacher would use this type of program. So this was in particular for middle school students. So introducing a feeling word. And the feeling word might first be introduced by talking about that experience. And in the chapter they used the example of alienation. So, before introducing a sort of foreign word, ask the children, have you ever had the experience of being left out? So to generate within them that feeling, it'll be easier for them to connect a big new word with the feeling if we generate that feeling state first. So talking about what it feels like to be left out, then talking about the word alienation helps them tie those two things together. Then looking at helping them look at, remember we talked about that perception of emotion and the ability to perceive it from different types of things. So looking at designs or looking at a piece of art and having the children be able to interpret alienation from designs or make their own designs of what would that look like? How would they signify that in a drawing or symbolically somehow? The next step is academic and real world association. So this could be a social studies class, and in talking about the word alienation, you could talk about the Holocaust. You could talk about genocide. You could talk about experiences of alienation during other kinds of traumas or other kinds of things in the world. Real-world associations for the children to make it personal as far as their own experiences. Have they ever been left out? And what was that like for them? The next part of the assignment in this kind of program would be personal and family association. So the children would be given the assignment to go home and talk to anybody in their home environment about their experience of alienation, what's their description of it, and what's their experience of this. And then bring in all of that information back, the real world, the academic, the personal and family associations, to have a discussion about that and have the children share what their experience is about regarding this. And finally, a potential sort of last exercise using, just this one sort of theme of doing some type of creative writing assignment where a character in the story has this experience. How do they resolve it? What does it feel like for them? How do they manage it for themselves? Here's another example looking at the issue of problem solving and how using detailed and specific language to help kids go through the process of learning how to problem solve. So identifying, my problem was, the child would either do that verbally or do that, writing it down with a teacher's help perhaps. Who was involved in this problem situation? Who was there? Before the problem was solved, how did you feel? My stress level was, and I felt, identifying the feelings that are going on. And then to put yourself in the other people's shoes. In this situation, the other people must have felt, whatever, being able to identify that. What did you do in that situation? Well, I did or said what I thought was the best thing. But now look at, okay, what happened next? Did your solution solve the problem? If it didn't, what are at least, what are 1, 2, or 3 alternative solutions? What are some different ideas that you could have come up with to solve that problem? How do you choose which solution is the best? Why is that the best? And what could you possibly try to remember the next time this situation comes up so that hopefully the next time you could choose a good solution for yourself? One of the primary thing that CASEL has done is develop guidelines and protocols for assisting schools and school systems for bringing social emotional learning into the school. So Safe and Sound is a publication that's now a couple of years old, but it's basically a guide to evidence-based SEL programs. So not just programs that they sort of looked at and they sound good. You know, that's the problem with a lot of these things, is sort of they sound soft and fuzzy, and so everybody thinks, oh, we'll do that. But actually, you know, looking at evidence-based programs, in particular programs that do deliver in these 5 core areas of emotional intelligence that we talked about: the self-management, self-awareness, social awareness, relationship skills, and decision-making. Look at programs that have had proven effectiveness, and here's another big important point: look at programs that offer adequate training for the professionals that are going to deliver it. That's a really important aspect of bringing any kind of thing like this into your school. The other publication that SEL has made available is another guide that's more of an implementation guide. These kind of programs are not necessarily easy. You don't just pick them off the shelf and then start doing them tomorrow. But there's actually lots of steps as a school district, you know, researches the need for this, decides what type of program to deliver, decide who's is going to get trained, decide who's going to deliver, who's going to do quality assurance, you know, who's going to make sure that it's delivered right over time. That guide in particular helps schools with doing that. Because, you know, looking at how do you get SEL into the core academics? How do you teach it throughout the day? And finally, that other big thing is how do you partner with families? How do you partner with the community as you bring this effort into the school? These kind of efforts delivered only at school and not with family involvement are not likely to be successful. So does this make a difference? Does social emotional learning make any difference at all? Castle sponsored a meta-analysis, which means a study of all the studies that have been done, conducted by Durlach and Weisberg. And they looked at more than 207 studies, but ended up including 207 studies that involved over 288,000 students in grades K through 12. What they found was a 23% improvement in social skills, a 9% increase in positive social behavior, a 9% improvement in conduct problems, an 11% improvement in academics. These improvements, for most of them, sort of tended to wane, and they waned more in the schools where the programs were dropped as opposed to the programs that continued them over time. So it's just doing these things one time isn't going to be as effective as maintaining them over time. So now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about this concept of emotional intelligence at home. Children who are well-nurtured and whose parents help them learn how to calm down with upset basically have better functioning brains than children who don't learn these skills. And working with severely traumatized kids, as I have over the past couple of years, I see this again and again and again. These kids end up being given all kinds of diagnoses, you know, when usually PTSD is the only accurate diagnosis, but we call them ADHD, and in particular we call them bipolar disorder all the time. When really it's a trauma issue. They've never learned how to calm themselves down. That skill just isn't within them. And it's basically coming because their brain circuits for managing distress are just on fire, and they don't have these abilities to calm themselves down. So parents really are emotional coaches. And in order to serve as your child's emotional coach, you have to work on yourself first. That's the really big place to start. That's why at the beginning of the lecture I had you ask yourself those kind of questions of, you know, what do you think? How do you think you're doing on the skills of emotional intelligence? And do you have any work maybe to do on that? I think, even though it's not stated, I think one of the main lessons of emotional intelligence is that nobody can control your emotions. So if you think your kids are making you feel bad, that's the first place to start in recognizing that as you work on yourself, as you take control over your own emotions, you not only empower yourself in doing so, but you empower your child to do the same for themselves. We can't go around blaming other people for how we feel. As we looked at before, you know, the school programs that are trying to foster emotional intelligence are only going to really succeed if the same is being done at the home. The resource that I used for the next few slides is in your references. It's a book called Building Emotional Intelligence. And here are some of the things that the author suggests that parents do to foster emotional intelligence. Develop a quieting ritual for meal times. Lots of kids, sort of everybody eats on the run, or everybody eats in front of the TV. And this wouldn't have to be something that you do necessarily every meal time, but at least some of the time, slow down. Turn off the candle. Say a prayer. Or just gather together before you sit to eat. Actually, eating under stress, eating when we're on the run, or eating when we're still kind of agitated, eating while watching something stressful on the television, may be connected to, well, it is connected to poor digestion and maybe connected to poor health over the long term. Another thing that can help foster emotional intelligence is to make a special quiet place in your house that everybody could go to. And if you had that kind of place in your house, if your child went to it, that would be your signal, oh, my child needs some quiet time. I wonder what's going on. And you could know to either at least check in with them. They might want quiet time by themselves, but if you had that kind of designated place, that could be a signal, a way of communicating. Teach your children to use breathing to relax. The breath is the simplest way to relax. I've talked about that before. I'll talk about it again, no doubt. And I've included on here a very simple breathing technique that children can be taught really quickly called 4-7-8 breathing. It's very simple to do. You inhale over 4 counts. You hold your breath for about 7 counts. You exhale over 8 counts. Very simple. It can be done anywhere, anytime. You don't have to close your eyes. You don't have to enter deep meditation. But just a few breaths, few cycles of breaths done in that way can quickly calm down your nervous system. What are some other rituals that can build emotional intelligence? Spending time together outdoors as a family. ADHD has been called the nature deficit disorder by a number of authors. And there is something very healing and very good for us about getting outside, being barefoot on the grass, laying on the grass, laying on the earth is very healing for us. Talking about the body signals of emotions with your children so that they can learn what emotions feel like. As I said, emotions start off with a bodily sensation, and sometimes children don't even know exactly what their emotions are. So you can talk about your own signals, and you can suggest to your children if you see something going on, well, I think you're tense because I see that you're holding your body real tight. To help them learn this language, help them learn how to make these connections themselves. And as you do so, you'll be assisting them. Creating other kinds of moments of silence in the home. We talked a little bit about mealtime, but you could observe other moments of silence together. Turning off the TV, turning off the radio for a while, and just having some peace and quiet for a while. Another excellent way to teach emotional intelligence at home is to make the most of story time and talking about the emotional experience of the characters in the stories. Or you can even bring that into TV time, for that matter, and make better use of TV time to talk about the emotional experience of the character in a movie or a program, of what that must be like, and what are they going through, and how would your child imagine how they would handle that kind of situation. Here are some other tips taken from the Castle website. Know your own triggers. Identify your own triggers, work on them. As I said before, your strong emotion is not related to just this moment. Your strong emotion in the right now in relation to your child is coming from all of your life experiences. So learning how to recognize that, learning how to separate those things, and therefore you'll be better able to manage it. Apologize whenever necessary. Take responsibility for your emotions. Take responsibility for your actions. Talk about what you felt. You can explain what you were feeling and why you did something. But especially for a younger child, talk about what your child might have felt like as you lost control, as you yelled at them, as you denied, made a decision to say no in the moment, and now later you're thinking maybe it wasn't such a good idea. So talk about what it felt like for them to experience that refusal or that no. Don't humiliate or mock children, particularly children under 5, 6. They don't understand sarcasm. They don't get jokes. To some extent they do, but particularly things directed at them, they are downloading that into their little systems. So when you joke about them being bad or when you joke about them being wrong, that's an internal message that gets made right there. And the more times they hear that kind of information, the more they run that tape the rest of their life about how inadequate they are And most of us struggle with that to some extent. Focus on strengths and on what is done well first. You know, when you walk in and you see the job halfway done, celebrate that. Oh, you started picking up. Awesome! Then you can move to the rest of the task. But when we walk into a situation and go, oh, the house is a mess again, it's a very different kind of situation. You know, when you focus on strengths and focus on efforts, then you're making progress with your child. Encourage sharing and helping. Do some volunteering. You know, I mean, even young children can be, I don't think they should necessarily be, you know, like go clean up your room, but even young children can be helping to clean around the house and participating in the house, as well as getting out and doing some other kind of volunteering in the community or beyond. And one of my favorite sayings is, you know, pay attention to the child and not their behavior. Children act out when their emotions are not managed well. Look at that first. Understand that first. Then you'll be able to prevent that behavior in the future. But if every time we just go after the behavior, try to come up with the consequence for it, that behavior is likely to keep on repeating itself over and over again. So Linda Lantieri, who is one of the co-founders of this organization, has a book that was my other main resource for this program. And lo and behold, the activities that she then focuses on, the majority of the book are relaxation and mindfulness. Two of my favorite things. Who knew I'd find that as I bought this book? These kind of activities Patrice Thomas calls heart and soul time with your kids. And the book, after talking about some general guidelines and the overall issue of emotional intelligence, provides written instruction as well as an audio CD with exercises for 3 different age groups of children. For 5 to 7-year-olds, I think 5 to 7, and then 8 to 15 or something like that, and then the higher ups. She talks about how you can share these activities with children with an attitude of learning together, with there being no right or wrong way to do it. You know, kind of talks about the pitfalls. You know, if you start off trying to do this with a 5-year-old, they might squirm their way through it the first time, but that's okay. They don't have to be still right away. And if you try to start doing this with a 15-year-old and you've never done anything like this before in your family, they might think you're really weird. And so you just have to kind of take it slow. That's one of the reasons she talks about start doing some of the other rituals first, to kind of establish that connection and establish that pattern before whipping out the CD and saying, okay, lay down and do this with me. Doing them is the only way to learn them. These are things that we can talk about and read about all day long, but until we get on the floor and turn down the lights and turn off the TV, we're not learning anything from them. And children learn best by doing. We can't lecture at children about how to feel or lecture at children about how to problem solve. They have to be walked through the process. They have to do it themselves. Be patient and persistent. If you started doing these things and did them for a week and your house feels still chaotic and overwhelming, just stick with it a little longer. They're not going to be an overnight transformation. And I know in my own meditation practice, I still don't transcend and go anywhere. I'm just plugging away and trying to turn off my brain just like everybody else. So what do we get out of doing this kind of thing with our kids? Increased self-awareness, self-understanding, improved ability to relax. Basically, I think we'll get to that self-awareness and self-understanding through relaxation. Improved concentration and attention. If we're less stressed, we can attend better. Improved communication and better understanding. As you do these kinds of activities with your children and then talk about what's going on, you're going to have a better connection and a better understanding of your child. So progressive muscle relaxation is one of the activities, and this has actually been around for quite a while. Developed from a doctor's observation that tense muscles kind of create anxiety, and relaxed muscles fosters calm. So in progressive muscle relaxation, that's basically what we do, is we tense muscles, hold them tight for a breath or two, and then relax them, and hold it relaxed for a breath or two. Dr. Ron has a program upstairs that he did some years ago, an audio CD of using this kind of thing just for adults, so tense and relax. And this exercise is known to lower blood pressure, heart rate, and respiratory rate. In other words, it turns off your stress response. Body scan is kind of related to tense and relax. It's a slightly different sort of thing where you just pay attention to different parts of your body. So you can start off with your toes and kind of make your way up your legs and just sort of putting your attention on that body, telling it to relax if it feels tense, but just learning how to check in, learning how to notice what's going on. Once you kind of have a sense from another kind of program of how to connect with your body, body scan is something you can do quickly in another situation where you're starting to get tense, and then be able to catch yourself, oh yeah, my shoulders are starting to do this today, and catch them before you go home with a neck ache or a headache from being tense all day. And the other exercise that Linda includes in her book is mindfulness. And mindfulness simply means to pay attention without judgment. It can be practiced during any activity. We can all choose to be more mindful no matter what we're doing. And we can all benefit from doing that. Oftentimes we're doing the dishes and thinking about something else, or we're driving and thinking about something else. But mindfulness just says to put all of your attention, all of your focus on what you're doing in the moment. Parents can all afford to be more mindful sometimes of just being with your child. You know, sometimes we're with somebody, but we're only half there. We're not truly present and not truly available. In doing mindfulness from a state of relaxed awareness, basically, you know, from sort of lying quietly or sitting quietly, you just notice what's going on in your body or in your thoughts or in your surroundings, and then just give it a non-judgmental label, and then go back to your breath, go back to attending to your body. So practicing mindfulness in this way first helps you to then bring mindfulness to the rest of your daily life. Linda Lantieri talks about in the opening chapters of the book that she was actually in a New York City school only blocks away from Ground Zero on 9/11, and about her experience there. And she closes it relating a New York City teacher who told her that, you know, early on in the classroom, in the school year, when her classroom was kind of escalated, she told the class, okay, I need it so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. And the kids got it. And for the rest of the year, whenever she or anyone else needed a moment of silence, anybody could say, I need a pin drop. And they'd ring a chime to signal the beginning and end of a minute and have a moment of silence just so everybody could calm down. So I think that's the kind of thing that doing these things for children can bring them. And that brings us to our conclusion slide. So emotional intelligence is based upon certain skills. They can be measured and taught. Emotional intelligence is associated with positive outcomes in work, school, and relationships. Social and emotional learning delivered in schools can improve academic performance and engagement in school. And if we want to build emotional intelligence at home, it takes focused efforts, which includes making time for rituals, relaxed awareness, mindfulness, and other activities. And now we'll see if any of you guys have any questions or comments. And if you'll wait, if you'll hold up your hand, Jan or Nancy will bring the microphone to you.
A 17-year-old that has emotions that just go through the ceiling, just like that, very, very fast. Right. He threw a clock at his mother, hurt her. What are the tools that he could use to control that temper so that he could get in real bad trouble someday? And so what are some tools? I know you said the breathing, count to 10, but are there any others?
Well, basically here, I mean, we offer a lot of other tools. You know, having the appropriate kind of biologic support. I mean, that's kind of, I straddle both worlds. It's sort of knowing that, you know, we've got the ability within us to do a great deal for ourselves and for our healing, but we do have to be motivated, and that can be the difficulty sometimes in working with teenagers, I find. On a biological level, a lot of these emotional upheavals may be coming from nutrients missing or being deficient. From his lacking certain nutrients. And that's one of the things that we focus on here at the center.
ADD.
he's got the symptoms of ADD. Nobody really knows what's going on in his brain until we measure his nutrient levels or get a picture of his brain or something like that. He's got symptoms, but that doesn't mean very much in my mind. He may need lots of support in order to learn. I mean, he can learn some of these things. He has to be motivated to try them and explore them. The whole family needs to be involved in helping him go through that.
But tools, are there any tools other than breathing, counting to 10? Can you give any other tools that thing that it makes him throw a clock? Is something instantly that he can do to control that behavior?
He needs to know how to calm down when he's not escalated in order to have any difference in his reactions when he gets triggered. There's no quick fix, especially for a child he's probably been doing that all of his life at this point. And so having that behavior go away will take a lot of focused effort on the part of everybody.
Yes, thank you so much for this, and wondering if you're taking this into the schools, especially to administrators. And the reason I ask, hello Dorothy, my friend, is I've been a public school teacher in USD 259, and my experience was, especially during this age while we're teaching to the test, it's making classrooms which are, by definition, have to be very regimented and really don't allow for the type of processing that you need to develop that sort of awareness.
Right.
And so we, of course, understand the larger value of it, and yet I don't feel like we as teachers have the advocates at the higher level to stand up and say, no, you are taking a shortcut that's harming your child. We've got to see the big picture and to advocate for that. And just wondering about your comments. And there's a master teacher sitting right here in front of me, Dorothy, to my left.
I mean, I've not tried to bring this message to schools per se. I mean, that's really Castle's mission. You know, that's their primary reason for existing, is to help. So, I mean, I ended up using information from their slides, but it's okay to download their PowerPoints and use their information, so you don't even have to make the slides yourself. I guess the issue is, how do you get their attention? You know, how do you get in front of them? I'd be glad to talk if somebody gets me. Get me the engagement, I'll show up.
Hi. I am fascinated by your subject. I'm a veteran elementary teacher. I'm retired now, but I developed a program just identical to this with other things involved as well. And piggybacking on what Ann just said, I have had trouble getting this into the schools. The school systems tend to think they know all the answers, and they're having a hard time being open to new solutions. But the teachers are open to it.
Right. But it really does take focused effort on all levels. I mean, I'm seeing that in the other work that I'm doing. Talking about emotional healing for traumatized kids. If you try to just go in and deliver that to the foster parents and don't deliver it to the social services administrators, doesn't work.
Right. It's got to be a collaborative effort.
Right.
You're right.
The preceding program was presented by the Center for the Improvement of Human Functioning International in the Bright Spot for Health Lunch and Lecture Series. To inquire about additional health-related information available on DVD, audio CD, VHS, or audio cassette, simply call 316-682-3100 or drop by 3100 North Hillside in Wichita, Kansas. To discover more about the Center and what we have to offer, be sure and visit us on the web at www.brightspot.org.